Hi, everyone. Welcome back to our third newfangled digital chat about Codename Verity by Elizabeth Ween. This week we are talking about pages, let's see, 207 through 268, I believe, was the section that we covered for today. And a lot has happened. We've obviously changed narrators. So it is going to be a very, very exciting chat today. We've had a lot of interesting revelations over the first 60 or so pages of Maddie's point of view in this story. So I just wanted to ask all of you, if you're listening in right now, let me know if you have been able to log on to Edmodo and get everything together. Chloe, you sent me a message just a minute ago asking for the YouTube link for the live chat, and I just posted it on the forum. I hope you were able to get it. But go ahead and say hi if you are listening in on Edmodo so that I know how many people we have here. Right now, it looks like we have 0 viewers, but it looks like we have at least Shelby and Chloe on the Newfangled Edmodo site. So let me just introduce myself again. My name is Laura Jenkins, and I'm the Young Adult Coordinator here at the Coeur d'Alene Public Library. Again, let me know if you can hear me. I'm not sure if you can. I know Mrs. Yother is on the chat, so go ahead and let me know, Karen, if you're able to hear me. I am trying a new laptop today, and I'm not seeing it registering my sound right now. But yeah, just 1 second. Let me see if we can find the chat. Let me see if it's actually coming through. One viewer. Are you able to hear me? Could you please let me know on Edmodo? We are trying a new laptop at our library today, and I'm not sure if the speakers are working correctly on it. So I'll wait for that. And in the meantime, I did post an opening question on Edmodo today. If you want to go ahead and take a look at that, it's after Shelby's group post to everyone. And you can see that opening question lets you know we've now seen bits of the story from both Maddie, Kitty Hawk, and Julie's points of view, and in both of their writing styles. So which do you like better, and why do you like that one better? So we've obviously had Verity giving us her viewpoint from the prison, or from the Gestapo headquarters, and then we've now had Kitty Hawk, or Maddie, giving her viewpoint from the Thibault's farm, where she is kind of being protected right now by the French resistance, and then also by the Thibault family that isn't directly involved with the resistance but is helping her out. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Let me know if you are able to hear me. I'm not seeing any posts on Edmodo, so I'm hoping that everyone is able to hear. It looks like we have 2 viewers now. So welcome to the chat. I hope you guys have been able to log on all right. Please, please, please let me know if you're able to hear me. Let me just try a couple. That muted it and unmuted it, so hopefully that's working now. And let me just check one more time to see. I apologize for my voice today. I just got over a flu and a bug, so I'm still kind of recovering from that. But we are going to get started now. Let me just test one more thing and see. Okay, great. So looks like my voice is working. Just wanted to double check on that. There's a delay on the video, so it's kind of weird watching myself talk on the other monitor while I'm trying to talk to you guys on this one. So it's pretty funny. Anyway, okay, great. I'm glad, Chloe, that you can hear. It looks like Shelby can't hear very well. I'll try to see what I can do to turn up the microphone on here. Just 1 second. There we go. Let me. Okay. So can you hear me better now, Shelby? Try turning up the speakers on your devices, and let me just see if I can update the settings here. Hopefully that just helped And let me just make sure the microphone audio is turned up as well on here. Okay, all of that should be turned up. Let me just make sure everything is working well over here too. Sorry, just making sure a couple of things are fixed. I thought I had everything worked out, but you never know until you get started. So let me just make sure everything is working properly. But go ahead, like I said, and respond to that very first question on Edmodo. Like I said, we're now seeing the story told from the viewpoint of not only Verity or Julie, but also from Maddie, Kitty Hawk. And I want to know which viewpoint you guys like better and why, and talk a little bit about the settings that they're both in, which setting you prefer, everything like that. Okay, that's better, Shelby. Okay, I'm glad. All right, then we're going to get started. And because we have a lot of stuff to talk about, this is a really, really exciting part of the book because right now, oh, one reminder. Remember, we are trying to facilitate a spoiler-free chat space here on Edmodo. So make sure that if you are discussing the book on Edmodo and listening in on the chat and kind of contributing to the questions, you're only responding with information from pages 268 and down. So we don't want to be talking about the ending of the book because we're going to talk about that at the Hayden Public Library meeting next week. So for now, let's just mainly focus on what we learned in this section and what we learned prior to this section. So I have a ton of questions for you guys. Obviously, we learned a lot of different things from Maddie's viewpoint in this, and there have been lots of aha moments in this section of the book as we dive into the story from Kitty Hawk's point of view. So first of all, we got to the end of you haven't read all of it? Okay, so Shelby, I hope that you've read most of this section because there's a lot of different kind of like spoiler type things in here. So I'm sorry if I spoil a little bit of it for you. Let's see if you guys have responded. It looks like nobody's responded to that opener question yet. That's okay. You can get back to it. If you don't want to respond to the questions right now and want to respond to them later, that's all right too. Just let me know that you're planning on just listening in and then responding to the questions later. And then I won't take too long to wait and see if there are responses. So thank you so much, Chloe and Shelby, for letting me know that you're able to hear and that you're ready to go on the chapters. But, okay, so we're going to start off with this awesome section where it says part 2, Kitty Hawk, which is basically this big point where we've been thinking that Maddie has been dead this entire time. We've been thinking that Maddie crashed with the plane, and based on the photos that were shown to Verity in the first section of the book, we thought that Maddie had died along with the crashing of the plane. So here we are, Kitty Hawk, and she's actually alive. Was anybody surprised by that? I know the first time that I read this book, I saw Kitty Hawk and I was like, what the heck is going on? I can't believe that she's actually alive and Verity doesn't know. And oh my gosh, I can't believe that all of this is happening. So, all right, it looks like Chloe hasn't read that far yet. I'm so sorry. I just spoiled a big part of the book for you. That is the section that we're discussing today though, so I'm sorry. We're going to be talking about that today. So if you don't want spoilers, I don't want to say don't hang out for the discussion, but you can always come back and look at the questions online later. So if you're not ready to talk about it and you don't want anything else to be spoiled for you, right now would be a really, really good time to just log off and go work on your reading and get caught up to the point that you want to be at before listening in on these questions. Because there are some very, very intense spoilers that are going to be coming your way right now. So she starts off and we're really, really surprised that Kitty Hawk is alive because now it's from her viewpoint. Let's just see. Yeah, what pages have you and Chloe read to? What pages have you, Chloe, and Shelby read to in the book so far? And then we can, I can kind of gauge what all you guys have learned about. It's okay to, okay, spoilers are fine. All right. Then we'll just keep going with this. And you won't be as surprised, but you'll kind of get to see all the puzzle pieces as they're falling into place. So we just spent the entire first section of the book thinking that Kitty Hawk had died in the plane crash that left Verity stranded in France. And now we're surprised because, oh my gosh, Kitty Hawk is narrating this part of the book. So on page 214, which is right at the very beginning of our section, let me just get to it. Maddie describes how the resistance was able to fake the crash scene. And were you surprised by this revelation that Maddie has survived the crash? And were you surprised that Verity had lied about the radios, giving away fake codes to her captors in order to kind of secure her survival for a little bit longer? Um, so that's one of the big questions that I have for you, because I know that I was incredibly surprised when I found out that Maddie was still alive and that she was in fact in good hands with the French resistance. So let me just make sure those are posted on Edmodo for you. There we go. Okay, so you've read 0 to 196, so you're not too far behind, Chloe. It's going to be okay. You're almost to the end of that section. So that is going to be just fine. And then the other follow-up question that I still have, I'm kind of debating this back and forth with myself. Do you think that Verity knows that Maddie is alive or suspects that Maddie is alive? Because there are a lot of different things that happen in Verity's section, what with the random italicized words and then the underlining and everything that happens, that you feel like Verity is leaving clues for somebody. And what I hope, at least, is that she believes Maddie is still alive and is hoping that Maddie is coming for her, or is at least going to get these clues and know that Verity was telling the truth all the way to the very end, just like she says, and kind of be able to inherit that lovely story of friendship that Verity recounted in her notes to the Gestapo officers. So definitely something to think about. Another really, really big point of this entire section is that we are looking at different perspectives now. So we are onto a second narrator. We're learning a lot about the other side of different things that Verity has told us already. So things like the plane crash, where we believed that Maddie had died. Things like Etienne Thibault, the French guard of Verity, and how his whole family isn't collaborating with the Germans in this. He is actually the only member of the family that's part of this collaboration movement. The rest of his family is part of the resistance, or at least assisting in some other way. So that's kind of an interesting perspective to get Maddie's viewpoint on the Thibauts and the rest of the family in there, and not just Etienne himself. So we also get another perspective. I loved this part from Georgia Penn's interview with her. So the American reporter that came in and interviewed, and Verity was so put off by her and so frustrated because it seemed like such a fake situation. But we learn in this section that Verity was actually faking all of that. And we have to understand that, remember, this is an epistolary account. So Verity was writing this as a series of letters, as a series of notes for her German captors. So we can't trust everything that she wrote in her section, because we don't know whether she was telling the truth or not. She's an unreliable narrator because she's telling a story that's going to help her survive from the German viewpoint. So she's telling a story that she thinks is going to give her the highest likelihood of survival, or, as we learn later on in the section, possibly is going to help her succeed in her mission. So the original mission to blow up the Gestapo in Orme. So we've gotten to see the other side of Georgia Penn's interview, learn a little bit about the subtleties that are going on there. And then we even have a different perspective on Anna Engel, who is Verity's guard, so the female guard. And instead of referring to her with really mean derogatory names and kind of making fun of her, Maddie actually refers to her often as the slave girl, and even goes so far as to define Anna Engel's last name, which actually means angel in German. So kind of an interesting take on Engel's character as opposed to what Verity views her as. So just a very harsh person, somebody that beats her, somebody that's mean to her. But from Maddie's viewpoint, you see her more as a person that's worthy of your sympathy. So two very, very different perspectives on a lot of different things in this section. And from getting Maddie's viewpoint, kind of from the outside perspective, outside of the prison, um, we're getting to see a whole lot of different ways of viewing what Verity has seen in very, very close quarters. So Chloe just posted a pin on Edmodo, and she says, I think that she thinks she is alive and she wants to believe it, but she doesn't know. So Verity wants to believe that Maddie is alive, but she isn't 100% sure. And she definitely couldn't give away the idea that Maddie would be alive, because then the Germans would know that there was at least one more either English spy or pilot or somebody out there that they still needed to catch. So very, very good point, Chloe. Yeah, Verity wants to believe that Maddie is alive, but she can't be sure. Definitely. So something to think about. Okay, so now we're going to talk about a couple of fun little history factoids that I found. One of the differences, the huge stylistic differences between Verity's account and Maddie's account, is that Maddie is very much a science and math-based person. She enjoys looking at things and taking them apart and kind of looking at all of the different ways that things work. So when she goes through and talks about different things like planes, she's able to give us technical aspects of the different planes and talk about how they run and how they function, and talk about all of the different parts of the plane and how those kind of contribute to different things that are going on. Whereas Verity had very limited knowledge of what was actually happening with planes. So we didn't get to get those technical aspects from her. She focused more on the friendship story between herself and Maddie, and then also all of the human relationships that were going on. But you can definitely see that very from the very beginning of Maddie's section. She talks about the terpenes, which is one of the very first things that she mentions in here. It's on the very second page of this section, actually. And after this, we basically know that it's not Verity narrating any longer. But there's a fun history lesson in here. I had no idea what an terpene was when I started reading this book. So I did a little bit of background research on it, and you can actually read the background research at the very end in the author's note at the end. Don't read it until you're done with the book, though. But there's a fun history lesson here. When Maddie is talking about the terpene on page 208, she is talking about the invention of the ballpoint pen, which didn't exist before this. So ballpoint pens were invented by a Hungarian journalist, which is the Hungarian that she mentions. His name was Laszlo Biro in 1938, and they were actually invented and then bought by the British government so that they could have writing devices that would work at high altitudes for their pilots to use in making notes on their maps. So the British government bought the licensing rights to the ballpoint pen, or the terpene as it was referred to then, and they used it for their pilots and in air warfare and things like that. So it's actually a pen that uses a ball bearing, so like a little ball at the very point, and it uses a different kind of ink than what was traditionally used in pens at that time. It uses newspaper ink, which is faster drying, and it doesn't clump as easily as other ink, or it clumps better than other ink so that it can dry faster. Sorry. But it's no wonder that Maddie was fascinated by it and wanted to talk about this a little bit in her section, because it's an implement that was basically created specifically for pilots. And she's a pilot, and as a pilot, she's going to be interested in that. So she kind of goes through how that was created and kind of the history behind it. And that's how Maddie thinks, very much in a logical, systematic, scientific way. So taking things apart and figuring out how they're going to help make things better. So that's kind of just a glimpse into how Maddie thinks in general, just how she goes about talking about the pen. Okay, so Shelby agrees with what Chloe said about Verity thinking that Maddie is alive. And I definitely agree with you guys. I think that she does want to believe that Maddie is alive, but she isn't absolutely certain that that's what's happening. So let's see if we have some other responses. It looks like Shelby has replied to a couple of posts. So let's just go back and see that. Oh, Chloe brings up kind of an interesting point, and so does Shelby. Shelby says ballpoint pens were a great invention. I have to hand it to the Germans. It actually wasn't a German invention. It was invented by the Hungarians, so from Hungary. But really, really interesting thing, and kind of that same sort of like Eastern Central Europe invention, and definitely a really, really great byproduct of World War II. And then Chloe is actually asking, is Maddie real? So she's kind of doubting the whole existence of Maddie to begin with. Is this even a character that is real? Is this somebody else writing from Maddie's viewpoint? So that's something to think about as well. Could Maddie just be a character that Julie made up in her mind? And we'll kind of find out later as this goes along. So let's see if we have any other responses. Just one second, let me scroll down. Okay. Let's see. So to the surprise questions about asking if you were surprised that Maddie had survived the crash, and were you surprised that Verity had lied about the radios? Shelby said that she wasn't surprised by either. So you definitely were a much more skeptical reader than I was. I was surprised by both of those things. I definitely thought that Maddie had died in the plane crash, especially since on the very back of the book, and we'll talk about this later, but on the back of the book, the blurb says on October 11th, 1943, a British spy plane crashes in Nazi-occupied France. Its pilot and passenger are best friends, but just one of the girls has a chance at survival. So I figured the reason that it said just one of the girls has a chance at survival is because Maddie had already died in the plane crash, and now it was Verity's chance to survive and get out and get away from the Gestapo and survive this whole ordeal. But now we kind of have a different situation because we find out that both of the girls are in fact alive. So who is it that is the one person that has a chance at survival? We're gonna find out as we keep reading. So okay, I almost run out of time. Okay, so other things. Let's see. Okay, yeah. So Shelby said exactly what I just pointed out. So to the question, do you think Verity suspects that Maddie is alive? Shelby said yes, because she is not too reliable since everything we read are things Julie doesn't mind the Germans knowing. So she's only writing things that she wants the Germans to know. Definitely very, very good point, Shelby, and exactly what you should be thinking at this point. So just to move along a little bit, get past the pen discussion, we're going to move on to page, I think that's supposed to say 222. Let me make sure. Yep, page 222, even though it says 122 in my notes. All right, so after the crash landing, Maddie is given shelter first in the upper loft of the Thibault's barn and later in their own house, so in the Thibault's house. She describes the fear that she feels, though, stating, I wish I was a writer. I wish I had the words to describe the rich mixture of fear and boredom that I have lived with for the past 10 days, and which putters on indefinitely ahead of me. It must be a little like being in prison, waiting to be sentenced, not waiting for execution, as I'm not without hope, but the possibility that it will end in death is there and real. So it's kind of interesting that she directly relates, without knowing that Julie has been captured, directly relates her experience in hiding as being in prison when we actually know that Verity herself is in prison and is going through the very same sorts of fears, but they're much more real for Verity because she is in definitely a life or death situation every single day, knowing that the end is probably not going to be positive for her. So another question for both of you at this point. Maddie and Verity are both in their own ways being held prisoner. In what ways are their different forms of captivity similar, and how are they different? So let me just pop that question up there for you guys, and you can respond to that. That's more of a personal question, so there aren't going to be any right or wrong answers to that. But I want to get your perspectives and have you start thinking about what their different forms of captivity are like, and what captivity really means. So definitely think about which situation you would rather be in. Would you rather be a prisoner who definitely knows what's coming for you? Would you rather be in Maddie's situation where there definitely is a little glimmer of hope, but there isn't a whole lot of hope in your situation, and every day you kind of live in doubt as to whether or not you are going to be able to make it out of there? So Chloe, Shelby has responded to Chloe's question about whether Maddie is real or not, and Shelby says this is a historical fiction, and I think Maddie is real in this book, but not in real life. So they are both fictional characters. So neither Verity Matt nor Kitty Hawk actually existed, but hundreds of women exactly like them did exist during World War II. So there were female spies and there were female pilots. So lots and lots and lots of different situations like this actually happened all over Europe during World War II. And Elizabeth Wein, the author, did a lot of research on female pilots and female spies during World War II and based a lot of her different descriptions in the book on the experiences of those women during World War II. So you can definitely bet that this is a fictional account, but it is also one that is based very resolutely on hard fact. Okay, So let's see, we have another response to the surprise question about Maddie being alive. Shelby also responded, Maddie is a skilled pilot and in training they must train. Um, that, and she wouldn't tell her captors about her country's secret weapon. So not sure exactly what you're trying to say there, Shelby, but definitely you're heading in the right direction with that, I think. So other things that we talk about in this section, oh my gosh, we are almost to the end of our time. So Maddie talks a lot about her fears and pondering fear and the effects that it has on her. On page 223, she lists her new fears. And her new fears are fire, bombs dropping on her grandparents, bombs dropping on Jamie, who is now a bigger concern for her than he was before. Nazi concentration camps, particularly since she is Jewish, and also a British pilot. Court martial is still on her list. Paul, the SOE officer in France, being English, letting people down, the Orme Gestapo, and mostly that Julie is dead. Her previous list included 1, court martial, 2, dogs, 3, not getting her uniform right, 4, people laughing at her accent, and 5, letting people down or not doing her job properly and failing to live up to expectations. So Maddie goes through and she kind of talks about how her fears from before were so trivial and how could she have possibly ever been afraid of those things now that she's in a completely new situation. So how does Maddie's new list of fears compare to her old one from the bike ride? And what do you think has happened to make them change? I mean, in her own mind, what do you think has happened? Obviously, she is now stranded in France and under the protection of the resistance and could be discovered any day. But what do you think has changed in her mind to bring those fears to the forefront and kind of make the other fears go away? And more generally, what do you think goes into creating fears in people? What are you personally afraid of? So I have another little history lesson for you about the Geneva Convention, but we're just going to skip over that, and I'll try to make up another little handout for you to post onto the Edmodo site. So let me pop up that question about fears. I'm just going to post that entire thing there so you guys have the list of all of her fears on Edmodo to use. There we go. Okay, so it's in there. Can we go until 4:10? I definitely can. Oh, you mean 5:10? Thanks, Shelby. Yeah, I definitely always go over time anyway. Looks like there are 4 people watching. Yay! I'm glad that we have 4 viewers today. So Chloe asked a question that I'm not going to respond to. It's, is Julie dead? We will find out by the end of the book what happens to both Julie and to Maddie. So I'm not going to respond to that one, but let me just tell you, you're definitely going to want to read to the very end of this book. It is one of the most wonderful books I have read in, I'm going to say, the past decade. It's definitely on my list of top 10 favorite books of all time. So I highly, highly recommend finishing it, and I highly, highly, highly recommend reading the companion novel, Rose Under Fire, which you have an excerpt to at the very end of your copy of Codename Verity. There's the first, I think, couple of chapters in there. And Shelby says her fears are ideal. Anybody would fear that. Definitely. Those are very, very serious fears, and most anybody in that situation would fear those same things. Exactly. So I'll send you guys a little blurb about the Geneva Convention, which I think needs a little more explanation than what they include in the book. I'm sure you guys haven't quite gotten to studying the Geneva Conventions in school yet, so definitely needs a little bit of explanation. Let me just give you a brief blurb explaining what they were. They were basically a series of treaties that were written in order to establish guidelines for countries for humanitarian issues during wartime. So basically how you should treat prisoners of war, how you should treat civilians, how you should treat people in general during times of war, and what the regulations are regarding the treatment of people during wartime. So I'll send you guys a little bit more information on Edmodo for that. Chloe, I'm not going to tell because it's a spoiler. It happens, like, different things happen at the very end, and it's a spoiler. So I'm not going to let you know what happens. But let's see, photos. Oh, we don't really have enough time. It is 5 o'clock, so I'm going to try to wrap up discussion at the bottom of page 230. Let's see. The photographer that's employed not only by the Gestapo but also by the resistance comes and brings the photos that he took at the crash site to show to Maddie. And he shows Maddie the photos that he took of the plane wreckage. And now, hearing the photos described from Maddie's perspective, what has changed? How does she look at them versus how Verity looked at them when she saw them? How is her inspection of the photos different from Verity's? So that's a big, huge question, one that you're definitely going to want to think about a little bit, because we're seeing all of these different things from other viewpoints now. We're getting to see Maddie's view on a lot of these different things, and it's very different from what Verity, who is in captivity, has been able to see. I know it's frustrating. You're just gonna have to keep reading, Chloe. Um, all right, so let's see. At the bottom of page 232, we talk a little bit more about the photos. They give a convincing look at the plane wreckage and show what appear to be 11 radios. When Verity revealed the code in her section of the 11 radios, did you think that she was actually revealing British secrets? And now that we know that she was not, has it changed how you think about Verity? And how has it changed how you think about Verity? So another question that these photos have raised. Because definitely at the beginning, she starts out the book by saying, I am a coward. Is she really a coward? She definitely has been given a little bit of leeway by the revelation that these photos have brought on. So a couple more things, just two more questions for you guys, and then we'll go. On page 261, Maddie says, I think she's still dead set on completing her assignment, talking about Verity, and has reason to believe that she can do it from inside, and that's why she's still going. So do you think Verity is still working on completing her assignment, or is she just struggling to survive? And a very last question for you guys about mystery. So on the back of the book, I told you it says just one of the girls has a chance at survival. We've read from both viewpoints now, from both narrators, and we've learned exactly what kind of danger each of them is in. Who do you think has the chance at survival, now that we know that Kitty Hawk is alive and both girls are in dangerous situations? So that is the biggest question that we're trying to answer at this point. Who is it that is going to survive this situation? Okay, so to wrap up, you guys, our next meeting is going to be on next Thursday, October 29th. We are going to be finishing the book, so reading pages 269 to 332. And again, I highly recommend that you read the author's debriefing section that is at the very end of the novel. She kind of goes through some of the research that she went through when she was writing the story, or before she even started writing the story. And that's a very, very interesting section to read. It talks about the Terpens a little bit more. It talks about female pilots and female spies and treatment of spies and the Gestapo in general. I highly recommend reading it. There's also a really great list of bibliographic resources for you at the end of the book. I definitely recommend checking out the different sites that she has listed, maybe looking at some of the different books. And she also, like I said, gives a preview of the companion novel Rose Under Fire, which is it's set in the same world, well, obviously the same world, but set in the same time period, and mentions some of the characters from Codename Verity, and kind of gives a little bit of resolution to what happens with the characters from Codename Verity. But then it takes the story one step further and talks about a girl named Rose, who's an American pilot, and basically her experience being captured by the Germans and then being forced into a concentration camp in Germany, not in Germany. I think it's in Austria. I'm not sure. Called Ravensbrück. So it's the experience of Rose in Ravensbrück, and it's absolutely phenomenal. It's just as good as Codename Verity in my eyes. So thank you guys so much for joining me for the chat today. I'm sorry that we went over yet again on time, but continue the discussion on Edmodo. I'll definitely be logging in tomorrow to update those questions, give you a little bit more information about the Geneva Conventions, and just basically checking what kind of responses you've done to the questions. So I look forward to seeing you on Edmodo, and I look forward to seeing you in Hayden next Thursday, October 29th at 4:30. We'll be talking about the ending of the book and possibly giving away some prizes. So I hope to see you guys then. Thanks for joining me.